want to know a little bit about your origin story. Who are your people? Where your people from?
Um, yes, well, thank y'all for having us here,
Of course.
inviting us. This amazing place, amazing people. But Terry Marshall, I'm the founder and executive creative director of Intelligent Mischief. My people, my family, all of my family, both sides are from Barbados.
Wow.
They immigrated to the U.S. in the late 60s, early 70s. I was born. I'll be succinct with this. It's a complex weave of histories.
Feel free to go.
Yeah.
All right,
I'm here
okay.
for it.
I was born in Boston. My family had lived in New York for 10 years before I was born. And they had moved to Boston, according to my mother and everyone else I talked to, because my father was following his best friend. He was like, he was like, kind of like, New York is, played out. Boston's like fresh green
the
area to
hotness.
go. They moved, but both, they had a large large part of my mother's side of the family, my father's side of the family, all still living in New York. And so we have family in Barbados, Boston, New York. And
Wow.
I grew up kind of like, I went to Barbados every summer with my mother up until I was 15. And I became foolish. I was like, I want to hang out with my friends in these streets.
Sounds right.
And we would go to New York. Like, New York is only 4 hours away from Boston. So we would
Yeah.
go to New York like every other month
Wow.
sometimes. So I feel like I was part of, I feel like I've grown up in all those places. Now, to go a little further back, what I recently have found out is actually my grandmother on my father's side is from Panama. My grandfather helped build the Panama Canal. That's how he met my grandmother and moved to Barbados. But he came from Ghana.
Wow.
And then there was apparently my grandmother's father was also Nigerian.
Wow.
So I still know all the stories of how they all ended up, but they ended up in Panama, helping build a canal, came to Barbados. So those are my multiple lineages I've recently found out.
Man, that's powerful.
That is powerful.
I love it.
I love it too.
Aisha.
So I'm originally from Trinidad and Tobago. I was born there and came to the States when I was 19, a while ago, to go to college. And my mom is from Trinidad. My father's from Dominica, another small island
Yeah.
in the Caribbean. So yeah, that's it for me. I was, my mom and my brother and myself migrated in the late 90s.
And you came to New York?
Came to Boston, actually.
Boston. Is that where y'all met?
That is kind of where we met. Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Boston.
I'm telling you. Interesting.
New edition.
My husband, my husband was born in Dominica.
Oh, really?
Yes,
Oh,
yes. He's from St. Croix.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. See that
Oh, my
island,
goodness.
island
Yeah.
love throughout.
There's a connection.
So I'm curious because a big part of this conversation that we are trying to unearth with Chains to Links is like, what is the evolution of Blackness, and what is the evolution of Black community? So I'm curious, when did you first know that you were Black? And the question is really Black in America, but given that you weren't born in the United States, Terry, were you born in the United States?
Yeah.
You were. So I'm curious about your respective experiences. When did you know you were Black and or Black in America? Which is a bit of a nuance.
Yeah. So, in Trinidad, like, people see themselves as Black, those who are Black. And when I realized that we saw ourselves slightly differently was I came for college, and it was, my first time being in a place I wasn't majority Black or people of color. And I was in the classroom, and I remember learning to realize that I was like the only Black person sometimes, or, saying something in class and realizing the reaction would be surprise, or like, it was a mediated reaction based on my identity. So it was slowly at about 19, sort of learning like, oh, I'm not expected to know this or be here or speak like this. And this is in 1999, or learning to walk in a room and like look around and count the number of Black people, because I knew, okay, that would mean it was like a safe room, or that I would be somewhat understood, or some degree of my experience would be reflected.
Like you needed to reach a critical mass of Black people
Yeah.
in this space.
Just to know, like, oh, would my perspective be echoed? You know, or would it seem completely foreign? And it was interesting because I was coming from overseas, but I knew that there was a baseline kind of Black experience that could be shared. I think an understanding of history and the implications of that history on what we're doing there at that point in time. And so, yeah, like walk in a room, like look around, be like, oh man, this Spanish class has no Black people. It's going to be wild. You know?
I love what you said, like a baseline of the Black experience. I want to circle back to that down the road, because I think that is the essence of what we're trying to really unpack as part of this podcast. But Terry, how about you? When did you first know?
Someone asked me this before, and I was just like, I just felt I always knew I was Black. Like, it's seriously. I mean, a large part because of my family and my mother. My mother tells some story. My mother, she immigrated here first, and she was a domestic worker. So she was like living in with like a white family in Manhattan, and she just tells a story about learning about racism in America. Like my father had to they got cheated out of. They went to buy a car and they got cheated out of something. My mother then went back and like she cussed out the guy and something, and she was like, okay, this is how you have to operate in this country or something. And so I just remember growing up in my house, like we knew we were Black, or you knew there was a difference. You knew like mostly those with wealth were probably white, and so like that. Like I just always had a knowing about that, but I feel like it must have came from my family and my mother, like saying things around the house. And then I was also sent to from first to 8th grade. I went to a largely Black Muslim school that was also like Afrocentric and stuff too. So I was like indoctrinated from a young time. So I was like keenly aware. I was a lot of ways. I was like. What was the character on Good Times? Michael?
Right.
Yeah, Michael.
Michael was my favorite character. I know people say Penny, and even, Thelma was also really cool.
Yeah.
But Michael,
Michael
would make
was low-key
peanut butter
shady,
jelly
like,
sandwiches,
always.
talking about like the final call. Like it was just like a it was so serious
Yes.
all the time.
I resonate with Mike. He's the family nerd.
Yeah.
And I'm very much the family nerd.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel that's probably why I identified with him too that way. Yeah.
True.
And as you all are talking about your vast experiences, which is all encompassing of this conversation, and maybe even the work that you all do, like this episode is called Before We Were Black, and this concept of humanness and personhood. And I squint a little bit because I'm like, is that even possible? Like, who am I before I am Black? And both of you all kind of raised different experiences around Blackness and the knowing of it, but also there's a little bit of like storylines of like struggle or difference or what have you that are also part of like the pride and the safety of being Black.